Hi there, I'm Nathan Hill from Honest Grapes, and I'm here to introduce you to this lovely selection of wines from that amazing and little known region of Italy called Marche. Now, Marche is in the sort of central eastern side of Italy, and in wine terms, it's sort of bordered by Emilia-Romagna, Tuscany and Umbria on the north, and then Lazio and Abruzzo on the south. And in fact, we will take a little peek down into Abruzzo on our fifth wine. Now, this is obviously a Roman region, and one that I hadn't really discovered until I got to know our amazing co-founder, my business partner, Tom Harrow. The Marche is the name of the Marche country in Italian, and it refers to the time when the area was ruled by the Germans, and it had many little sort of fields and fiefdoms and counties. But it's got lovely sandy beaches all the way down, and it's just the most beautiful, picturesque area. Now, the great thing about this selection of wines is that they're from pretty unknown grapes, but produce wonderful wines, and we've chosen quite a high-class selection here to show them off. So you've got the Apennine Mountains on the west, the Adriatic Sea on the east. It's a lovely sort of beautiful breezes, lovely sun, lovely, great place to go on holiday. So let's get stuck in straight away with the first of our whites. Now, I've got to say, some Italian label designs on bottles can be beautiful and artistic, like our friends at Castello Romatorio. Other ones are functional and do the job. These are a sort of bit of a mixture, but the wines inside are tremendous. So let's get stuck into this first wine, which is just known as a white, from Terra di Patrona, un Bianco. It's a mixture of the Pecorino grape and Sauvignon Blanc. Sauvignon Blanc, obvious international grape, lots of aromas there. Pecorino, just like the cheese, but it's nothing to do with the cheese, has got a more sort of weighty and crisp texture. So you've got fragrance, light tropical notes here. And a lovely textured weight and creaminess. That's a really lovely example of the ancient and the modern, the Pecorino grape from Italy with the international grape Sauvignon Blanc. I've got to go and have another go at this. It's not an overly sort of Sauvignon style. It's got just those lovely aromas, a bit more on the tropical side, perhaps a bit of tinned pineapple there. But it's on the weight. These Italian wines are so food friendly. Lovely, juicy, green gauge fruit, quite plush. It's not too tart and acidic. It's almost got lovely creaminess, and that weight of the Pecorino grape is just lovely. But that's a great quaffing wine, and also one I think will go very well with sort of fresh fish. Even actually sushi would be wonderful with that. Now, for our second wine, we're going to get into a pure Pecorino. And Pecorino grapes are delicious because they're often made into sweet wines and often quite high alcohol wines. Actually, in these two cases, this first one was 14%, which is, sort of high, not too high. The second one, the Torre del Nano, Falerio Pecorino, I'm terrible on my Italian. This is from a very famous region, the Falerio region. I think, if I've got myself right, it's in the southern bit, nearer to Abruzzo, and here we have a pure expression of the grape. So let's dig in and try that one. So what I really like about this, it's one of those grapes that when you make it into a dry wine, it gives it a good weight, lovely three-dimensional, rather like some of the very best sort of Pinot Grigios, Pinot Gris up from Friuli and Veneto in the northeastern part of Italy. Let's dig into this. So this effort from this famous area of Falerio, made by an estate called La Torre del Nano. They've called it Continelli, perhaps a little bit overladen on the names there, but the important thing is Pecorino grape, Falerio Pecorino. And this has got a lovely acacia note on it, almost quite honeyed, and it leads you to think, oh God, that's going to be a sweet wine. It's not at all. It's bone dry, very crisp, very mineral, very full-bodied in a really delicious way. Whereas this first wine had that extra hit of the sort of fragrance of the Sauvignon Blanc and that sort of a fruity acidity, or the tropical fruit and acidity, this one is much more down the line, and you feel that weightiness of the pecorino behind it. Citrus notes, acacia, slight honeyness, not very dry, mineral all the way through, and quite a full body. And that's going to beautifully with things like roast chicken with lots of herbs, lovely balance and weight, grilled fish. It's just that type of wine that'll go beautifully with something herbal. I think chicken would be nice, and grilled fish would be beautiful with that, and salads based on the same. Now for our third white wine, this is a really unusual wine. So a very famous grape that you may have come across called Verdicchio, and its most famous incarnation, I guess, is the famous Verdicchio di Castello di Jesi. But in fact, on a whole tasting, when I tasted loads of these, this particular example, you'll notice, isn't called Verdicchio. It's made by an estate called Glaus, and it's called Glaus Marche Bianco IGP, so it's just a white wine. But actually why that is it's made just 1 kilometre from the sea, just outside the official region of the Castello di Jesi area, and so they're not allowed to call it that. But actually for me this was the very best sample. Again, a lovely organic wine. And in this case, we immediately pick up sea breeze. So let's forget it doesn't have that famous name of Verdicchio di Castello di Jesi. In Italy, this is almost known as the white Barolo, which I think is really good because it really says something about it in terms of its weight, but also its sort of succulence and poise. So lots of green almonds and thyme. Bone dry, weighty again, and the reason I'm tasting them in this order is it's even more weighty and mouthfilling, quite rich. We're only at 13% alcohol here, so not too heavy on the alcohol. It's really the body, what the French call the matière. It's really great there. Loads of texture and a pleasant salinity on the finish. Now, maybe I'm being over romantic here, but I always think wines made near the sea. But I pick up sort of, maybe it's romantic. I think a bit of sea breeze here, a bit of salinity on the taste. Well, whatever it is, it's definitely great. And this wine, across a whole tasting I did, to get sort of examples of the great white grapes for these first three of this area of Marche. This one has got the most poise to it. It's got a real body to it, something really elegant. This is going to go beautifully with sort of more robust fish and seafood dishes, but also I think with hard cheeses. That is quite a treat. So now let's get on to the reds. Now here I'm going to start with, another famous but not very well known outside of this area Italian grape called La Crema, and in typical Italian style it's called La Crema di Morro d'Alba. So the grape is associated with the small town of Morro d'Alba, and it's called La Crema di Morro d'Alba Superiore, which means it's taken from the sort of cream of the crop. Perhaps an extra little bit of alcohol in there, but ripeness is very easily achieved with global warming nowadays. In fact, this is from 2016. It's only 12% alcohol, so it's lower than the whites we've had so far. Let's dig into this one. Now, the La Crema grape, you might think about lachrymose, exactly. It's known as the tear grape, and it's known as that because when the grapes are ripe, they sort of exude a few drops looking like tears. In fact, Jancis Robinson said of this grape and of these wines, she particularly remarked on the variety of herbal notes. And I very strongly here get sort of myrtle, lavender, a whole sort of rich sort of potpourri of dried herbs here. It's a glorious smell. You know, like those sort of twigs of lavender and myrtle and thyme and sage and all of that sort of on the herbal side of potpourri. Now, the taste is quite surprising because whereas the bouquet of the wine made me think it was going to be incredibly intense and robust, In fact, the tannins on this are very soft and fine. And it's a very smooth red here. In that sense, quite unassuming. It's not over the top. It's not got a huge big bite, but it's got that lovely softness without any rusticity. For me, this really does well. And I pick up a little bit more sort of cinnamon, allspice, and some nice dark fruit there. It's quite a treat, this one. And as I said, surprisingly sort of soft. I was expecting to be faced with this big, robust wine, but it's not. It's very soft and elegant. I think this would be a beautiful pairing with things like veal. The tannins are smooth enough also for it to go with hard cheeses. I'd have thought also particularly ones that are on the sort of nutty side. The acidity here, there's a good streak of acidity at the back, but this is the least acidic of the three wines we're having. So this one, I think, really well suited to less fatty meat. Now we're going to pop down just south of the region of Marche to the region of Montepulciano and Montepulciano d'Abruzzo. Again, really famous. And in fact, this is another new selection for the Honest Grapes Sommelier selection. And for me, this is a marked change from the wine it's taking over from. Amazingly, this one is from 2020, so the decades are catching up with us. Let's tuck into this one. I'm going to be straightforward with you about this one. This has really benefited from having an hour outside the bottle. It really opened up. Now, what I've got here is I've got an intense violet red colour, and if you hold it over a sort of white tissue or something, you'll really see that. The nose, whereas there were lots of sort of dried herbs on the Lacrima di Moro d'Alba that we had, on this Montepulciano d'Abruzzo, we've got cloves, we've got tar, we've got tobacco, and we've got deep but really bouncy red fruit. And then on the taste of it, big bags of fruit, more red fruit there, bit of dark fruit at the finish. The tannins, whilst not as smooth as the ones on the Lacrima, they're not rustic. They're just nice coating tannins, quite fine. Basically, this is a juicy wine. It's young, of course. But there's lots of wine, sort of vinous notes, lots of red and a bit of black fruit. More of that sort of warm spice coming through. This is one of those wines that is just brilliant with pizza, with things with ragu, all those hard to pair Italian dishes that have sort of meat and tomatoes and cheese and things like that. We go very well with hard cheeses again, just sort of knock the edge off those bits of tannin at the back there. Now for our final wine in this lovely lineup, this real adventure, this romp through the Marche. We'll go on to the Serrapetrona. So this is from a grape called the Vernaccia Nera, which is actually either a relative of or the same as the Grenache grape. We're now going to 2015, so a lot older, this wine, nice and mature. And don't we just get this on the nose? So Vernaccia Nero is mainly used to make Vernaccia di Serrapetrona, which is a sparkling red wine. And in fact, we've also put a few bottles of that on our sommelier selection. It's a sweet, sparkling red wine. So not one for the faint-hearted, but particularly interesting. In fact, in that wine, nearly half of the grapes are dried and then the new juice introduced over it. But this one is just bursting with Morello cherry fruit and blueberries and strawberries, almost like a sort of red fruit basket going on here. A bit of spice, but less so, much less pronounced than the other wine we just had, the Montepulciano. Now, much bolder, savoury, slight note of balsam there. This is again showing this wine is now 6 years old. Sort of pulpaceous strawberries, but there's a big cornucopia of fresh ripe fruit going on here. And there's even sort of black pepper, dried herbs, as I said earlier, a bit of balsam, lovely juicy finish. And that's really long and really attractive. And again, at 13.5% alcohol, None of the wines in this selection are over the top. Funnily enough, the highest alcohol was our very first white there at 14, but most of these are sort of 12 to 13.5%. So they're delivering you a taste that's unusual. It's not like any collection of French wines I could introduce you to, or indeed those of any other country. But I think this is a marvellous way to rediscover, or discover if it's your first time to it, one of the lesser known regions of Italy and the splendid range of grapes they make. I hope you enjoy this selection of wines from Honest Grapes.